Imagine coming home from work one day and nothing feels wrong. You eat dinner with your family, maybe watch some videos for a while, scroll through your phone, and eventually go to bed like normal. And then you wake up the next morning and something feels horribly off. Not physically, mentally. You sit there in silence for a second, trying to process this overwhelming feeling in your chest, and then it hits you. You think you're dead. Not emotionally dead, not exhausted, not dead inside, actually dead. Your brain fully convinces you that you died sometime during the night. Maybe your body just hasn't realized it yet. Maybe this is some kind of afterlife. Maybe you're trapped in a dream or a purgatory where your mind still works even though your body doesn't. You start checking yourself. You touch your arms, your face, your chest. You're confused that your heart is still beating, confused that you can still breathe. Some people with this condition genuinely believe their organs are missing, rotting, or already decomposed. And no matter how irrational it sounds to everyone around them, they fully believe it. This is a real condition known as Cotard Syndrome, and it's easily one of the most horrifying mental illnesses ever documented. What makes Cotard Syndrome so terrifying is that it attacks the most basic thing a human being has: their sense of existence. Scientists still don't fully understand what causes it, which honestly makes it even scarier. It's usually linked to severe depression, psychosis, schizophrenia, neurological disorders, or brain injuries that affect the parts of the brain tied to emotion and self-recognition. Most cases tend to appear in adults, especially older adults, but there have been rare cases involving younger people as well. And while there's no single cure for it, treatment usually involves a combination of therapy, antidepressants, antipsychotic medication, or in severe situations, electroconvulsive therapy, also known as ECT, which has actually helped some patients recover from the delusion completely. In milder cases, a person might just feel emotionally detached from reality. They may say things like they feel empty or disconnected from the world around them. But in more severe cases, people genuinely believe they no longer exist. Some believe their blood is gone, some believe their organs have stopped functioning, others think they are immortal because in their mind, they already died. And this can become incredibly dangerous. There have been cases where people stopped eating because they believe dead people don't need food. Imagine trying to convince somebody to survive when their brain has already convinced them survival is impossible. And unlike some disorders that mainly affect the person experiencing them, Cotard Syndrome can also damage relationships around them. Families often describe it as terrifying because no matter how much reassurance they give, nothing works. You cannot logic somebody out of a reality their own brain has created. The scariest part to me personally is just how fragile the human mind really is. Because most people go their entire lives assuming their sense of reality is permanent. But disorders like this prove that your brain, the thing you trust more than anything else, can suddenly turn against you completely. And unfortunately, this isn't the only condition capable of doing something like that. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. First off, thank you all so much for the support lately. Seriously, it means a lot. We've been growing pretty quickly and it's been awesome seeing so many new people around. If you end up enjoying this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I'm currently trying to hit just 2,000 subs before the end of this month, so every bit of support helps. Also, shout out to Dreamcatcher, shout out to Meadow Enthusiast, and shout out to everybody who's been hanging around at the Discord server. If you'd like to join that, it's in the description down below. Anyway, enough of that. We've got about 5 more conditions to get through, and trust me, some of them gonna leave you just as unsettled as the first one. Let's keep going. Exploding head syndrome. Most people think the human brain becomes quiet when you fall asleep, but for some people, the exact opposite happens. There are people who will be lying in bed completely exhausted, finally beginning to drift off after a long day, and then suddenly hear a violent sound that doesn't actually exist. Not in a dream, not in a nightmare, right on the edge of sleep itself. Some people describe hearing gunshots, others hear screaming, electrical buzzing, doors slamming, thunder, or massive crashes that seem to happen directly beside their head. And despite how real it feels, there is never any actual sound. This condition is known as exploding head syndrome. And somehow, the name is almost scarier than the condition itself. What makes this disorder so disturbing is that the people experiencing it are usually completely aware that what they heard shouldn't have been possible. Like, their room is untouched, nothing actually happened, and nobody else heard anything, but their bodies react anyway. Their heart starts racing, adrenaline kicks in instantly. Some people sit upright in panic trying to figure out what just happened. And after enough episodes, many people stop fearing the sound itself and start falling asleep. One real documented case involved a musician and guitar maker named Dave Lovos, who experienced an episode while drifting off to sleep. Describing the experience, Lovos said, "It was a very sharp sound inside my head at the top of my skull." He also described seeing the flash of a car crash at the exact same moment. Scientists still don't fully understand what causes this condition, but researchers believe it may happen when the brain struggles to properly shut down during the transition to sleep. Stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and sleep deprivation all seem to make episodes worse. The good news is that the condition itself usually isn't physically dangerous, and many people eventually improve through stress management, healthier sleep habits, therapy, or medication in more severe cases. But honestly, I think the reason this disorder scares so many people is because it turns one of the safest parts of human life into, something unpredictable. Sleep is supposed to be peaceful. Your brain is supposed to protect you while you rest. But disorders like this remind us that sometimes the thing creating the fear is the very thing that's supposed to keep us sane. Alien hand syndrome. In 1979, a woman named P.S. underwent brain surgery in an attempt to treat severe epilepsy. The procedure was called a corpus callosotomy. Definitely said that wrong. More commonly known as split brain surgery, and the goal was to stop seizures by severing the connection between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. At first, the operation seemed successful. Her seizures became less severe, and physically, everything appeared normal. But not long afterward, something strange started happening. P.S. would try unbuttoning her clothes with one hand, only for the other hand to immediately begin unbuttoning them. At times, one hand would reach for objects, while the other physically interfered with the movement. According to doctors studying her case, the conflict between her hands became so noticeable that it almost looked like two separate people fighting for control over the same body. This condition eventually became known as alien hand syndrome. And honestly, it sounds less like a neurological disorder and more like something out of a horror film. The terrifying part is that people experiencing alien hand syndrome are not hallucinating. They can physically see their hand moving. They know it is attached to their body, but during these episodes, the movement feels completely independent from their own intentions. Let's take a step back here from the script. I'm going off the script, okay? Put yourself in some of these people's shoes, right? Like, imagine you need life-saving surgery, and the only way to do it is to literally split your brain in half. And when you do that, it does kind of save your life, but now you have to live with the fact that your hand, your left or right, I'm not sure if this disorder affects a certain side, but basically, let's just say your left hand, all right? Your left hand is not yours anymore. It moves on its own, it does whatever it wants, it almost has a mind of its own. Truly, this one is one of the most bizarre ones that we're going to talk about. Imagine your hand, you're not even controlling it, and it just reaches out and picks up an apple or something and brings it to your face, like it thinks you want to eat. But how does it know to reach out and grab something or unbutton my shirt when I'm not controlling it? Doesn't that really freak you out? Like, seriously, some of these disorders terrify me, and that's obviously one of the reasons why I'm making this video. For myself, of course, to research these topics, also to spread awareness about them and talk about them. But man, anyway, sorry about that. Let's jump back in. Some patients describe the hand as feeling foreign, almost like it belongs to somebody else entirely. Others have reported needing to physically sit on their own hand, hold it down, or keep an object in it just to stop it from interfering with normal tasks. And unlike what many people think, this disorder did not disappear with old surgical procedures. Even today, cases still happen. Modern cases of alien hand syndrome have been linked to strokes, tumors, aneurysms, traumatic brain injuries, and neurodegenerative diseases that damage connection between parts of the brain responsible for movement and self-awareness. What scientists believe is happening is actually pretty disturbing. Normally, your brain constantly coordinates intention and movement without you ever noticing it. You decide to move your hand, and your brain carries out the command so seamlessly that it feels automatic. But with alien hand syndrome, that communication can partially break down. The movement still happens, the hand still functions, but the person no longer feels fully responsible for the action itself. And that creates this horrifying disconnect where part of your own body starts behaving in ways you never consciously chose. There is no universal cure for the condition, and treatment usually depends on whatever caused the brain damage in the first place. Some people improve over time through physical therapy or rehabilitation. Others learn coping techniques like keeping their affected hand occupied so it has less opportunity to interfere. But for some patients, the condition can last for years. And honestly, I think what makes alien hand syndrome, probably said that like 20 times now, so terrifying is not just the movement itself, it's what the condition implies. Like, as I said earlier, most people go through life assuming their mind is one complete unified thing, you know? But disorders like this reveal that the brain is really a collection of systems working together behind the scenes. And if those systems stop communicating properly, even your own hand can stop feeling like it belongs to you. And that's really scary, you know? Some of these disorders are just so unpredictable. They seem so absolutely unnatural, yet they happen almost every day. And man, I feel very, very sorry for those who have to deal with these types of things. But let's move on to the next one. Anton syndrome, also known as Anton-Babinski Syndrome, is a rare neuropsychological syndrome in which a person becomes cortically blind but remains unaware of their blindness. In simple terms, their eyes may still be physically intact, but the parts of the brain responsible for processing visual information have been severely damaged, usually as the result of a stroke, traumatic brain injury, or another neurological event. What makes this syndrome so unusual is that the patients often insist that they can still see normally. They may walk into walls, fail to recognize objects directly in front of them, or completely miss obstacles in their path. Yet when confronted, many will confidently deny that anything is wrong with their vision. To an outside observer, this can seem impossible. If someone suddenly became blind, surely they would notice. But Anton syndrome appears to demonstrate that awareness itself can be disrupted. The person is not necessarily lying or trying to deceive anyone. Instead, their brain seems unable to recognize that visual information is no longer reaching conscious perception. As a result, many patients will unknowingly fill in the gaps. If they fail to identify an object, they may guess what it is. If they bump into something, they may come up with an explanation that has nothing to do with their blindness. Scientists are still studying exactly what these patients experience internally, but several theories have been proposed. One theory suggests that while the visual centers of the brain are damaged, other areas responsible for self-awareness and error detection are also affected. In other words, the brain loses the ability to process visual information and simultaneously loses the ability to realize that anything is missing. Another theory focuses on a phenomenon known as confabulation. Rather than perceiving complete darkness, the brain may automatically generate explanations, assumptions, and predictions based on memory and context. The patient then experiences these guesses with such confidence they genuinely believe they are seeing normally. Whatever the exact mechanism may be, Anton syndrome remains one of the most fascinating examples of how perception and awareness can become separated from one another. And in my personal opinion, I think the most unsettling part about this psychological disorder is the person experiencing it will probably never realize that anything is wrong at all. I imagine this is similar to Cotard Syndrome in the sense that to anybody else, this sounds completely illogical, but to the person experiencing it, they 100% believe it. Like, they won't buy it at all if you tell them, hey, you actually cannot see anything. And I wonder what exactly they do see. Because obviously, if they're walking into walls and stuff, then what they're seeing is not true at all. But it's so untrue to the point where even if there's something right in front of them, they still can't identify it. So I'm sat here wondering, like, what do they actually see? You know, maybe it's like their brain just makes up whatever based on their other senses or something. I honestly have no idea, but let's move on. Capgras Syndrome. Up until this point, every condition we've talked about has had one thing in common. The person experiencing it is the one being affected, whether it be their senses, their body, or their perception of reality. But Capgras Syndrome is a little different, because instead of convincing someone that something is wrong with themselves, it convinces them that something is wrong with the people around them. Capgras Syndrome is a rare psychological condition in which a person becomes convinced that someone close to them has been replaced by an identical imposter. And I don't mean someone who merely looks similar or a stranger. No, I mean an exact duplicate. To everyone else, nothing has changed. Their spouse is still their spouse, their child is still their child, their best friend is still their best friend. But to the person experiencing Capgras Syndrome, something feels deeply wrong. The face is correct, the voice is correct, the memories seem correct, and yet they become convinced that the person standing in front of them is not who they claim to be. Some patients have believed that a husband, wife, parent, sibling, or close friend was secretly replaced by a double. Others have believed that multiple people around them have been swapped out entirely. Now, as for why this could be happening, scientists believe this may happen because the parts of the brain responsible for facial recognition become disconnected from the emotional systems that normally create a feeling of familiarity. In other words, the person still recognizes the face, they know who they're looking at, but the emotional sense of recognition never arrives. The brain notices this mismatch and attempts to explain it, and for some patients, the explanation becomes, this can't be my wife, this can't be my son, this person only looks like them. And what makes Capgras Syndrome just so tragic is that the people affected are often looking directly at the people they love most, and yet they believe those people are long gone. Some cases have been linked to dementia, schizophrenia, brain injuries, and other neurological disorders, though researchers are still trying to fully understand why it develops. And personally, I think what makes this syndrome so frightening, it turns familiarity into something like nerve-wracking, you know? It's really unfortunate because most of us never question the people closest to us. You know, we see a familiar face and our brain instantly tells us who they are. But Capgras Syndrome suggests that if that feeling of familiarity disappears, even the people we love most can begin to feel like strangers. Locked-in syndrome. Before we continue, I want to quickly mention that this next condition was covered by a creator named Fortune. If you've never seen his videos, I'll leave a link in the description. His video covers this topic incredibly well, and while I'm approaching it from a slightly different angle, I wanted to give credit where it's due. Unlike some of the other conditions we've talked about today, locked-in syndrome is not a delusion. In fact, what makes locked-in syndrome so terrifying is that the person experiencing it is often fully aware of reality. They remember everything from who they are to where they are. They understand what people are saying around them, and in many cases, they can remember exactly what happened to them. Locked-in syndrome is a rare neurological condition that occurs when damage to the brainstem leaves a person almost completely paralyzed while preserving consciousness. The result is something that sounds almost impossible. The mind remains awake, but the body can no longer respond. Most patients lose the ability to speak. Many lose the ability to move their arms, legs, face, and neck. Others lose even more. To an outside observer, the person may appear unconscious, like they're in a coma. But unlike a coma, consciousness remains. The person is still there, listening, thinking, remembering, and waiting. And that has led to some truly heartbreaking situations throughout medical history. In some cases, patients initially believed to be unconscious were later discovered to be fully aware of what had been happening around them. They heard conversations, they heard doctors discussing their condition, they heard family members speaking beside their bed, but they had no reliable way to respond. One of the most famous examples is a man named Jean-Dominique Bobby. In 1995, Bobby suffered a massive stroke that left him with locked-in syndrome. Nearly his entire body became paralyzed. The only movement he retained was the ability to blink his left eye. Imagine that just for a moment, okay? A lifetime of memories, thoughts, opinions, dreams, all still present, but reduced to a single eyelid. And yet, what happened next is remarkable. Using a system in which assistants recited letters of the alphabet and waited for him to blink, Bobby painstakingly communicated one letter at a time, letter by letter, word by word, sentence by sentence, and eventually he dictated an entire memoir. The book was titled The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And to me, this title perfectly captures the condition. A diving bell is heavy, sealed, and trapped beneath the water. A butterfly is light, free, and capable of flight, of course. Bobby described feeling as though his mind was still capable of wandering anywhere it wished, while his body remained imprisoned. Scientists estimate that locked-in syndrome is most commonly caused by strokes affecting the brainstem, though severe trauma, neurological disease, and other forms of brain injury can also lead to it. The prognosis varies from patient to patient. Of course, some patients regain limited movement. Some learn to communicate using assistive technology, but others remain almost completely paralyzed for the rest of their lives. Modern medicine has improved diagnosis significantly, reducing the risk of mistaking locked-in syndrome for unconsciousness. Researchers have even developed systems that allow some patients to communicate through eye tracking and brain-computer interfaces. But despite these advances, the condition remains one of the most devastating neurological disorders known to medicine. And honestly, out of all of these, I feel like this one might be the most, unfortunate, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're all very, very upsetting and unfortunate. And my heart goes out to everybody suffering from these conditions. But for locked-in syndrome, the most like gut-wrenching part is you are fully conscious in potentially just pitch black, right? You're just staring at the back of your eyelids for years, fully conscious. I don't even know if I assume you're able to sleep, but it's really, it's a sickening condition, really. And it takes away your ability to communicate as well. Like, we all know that if something goes wrong, we can tell somebody. We can ask for help, We can explain how we feel. But people with locked-in syndrome can't do that. And it's not because they're, unconscious or they can't think. No, they are fully aware. And it's because the connection between the mind and the world is severed. Throughout this video, we've talked about conditions that distort reality, alter perception, and challenge identity. But locked-in syndrome presents a different kind of horror. The person knows exactly what's happening. They understand the situation perfectly. And that understanding remains trapped inside a body that can no longer answer back. And if there is one thing these conditions demonstrate, it's that the human brain is far stranger and far more fragile than most of us ever realize. Before we finish the video, I want to mention one last phenomenon that I originally planned to include on this list. The reason it ended up as an honorable mention is because, unlike the other entries we've discussed today, this isn't actually considered a syndrome or disorder on its own. In fact, it's surprisingly common. It's often referred to as the call of the void. And chances are you have experienced it before. Maybe you've stood near the edge of a tall building and suddenly thought, what if I jumped? Not because you wanted to, not because you were suicidal. The thought just simply appeared. Or maybe you've been holding a kitchen knife and briefly imagined accidentally cutting yourself. Maybe you've been driving down the road and for a split second, imagine turning the wheel into oncoming traffic. Most people experience thoughts like this at some point in their lives. They're sudden, unwanted, and obviously extremely unsettling. I'm pretty sure there's another name for this that's been going around kind of recently. Oh yeah, intrusive thoughts. I'm pretty sure these are basically the same thing. The strange thing is that many researchers don't believe these thoughts necessarily reflect a genuine desire to do any of these things. I would hope so, right? One theory suggests that the phenomenon may actually be the brain's way of recognizing danger, which makes sense, right? In other words, your brain notices a risky situation and rapidly simulates what could happen if you acted recklessly. The conscious mind then interrupts that warning as an urge, even though the original purpose may have been to keep you safe. Another theory focuses on the thing I mentioned earlier, which is intrusive thoughts. The human brain generates an enormous number of thoughts every day, many of which are strange, irrational, or disturbing. And of course, most of them are discarded almost immediately. But when one of those thoughts clashes strongly with our values or instincts, it tends to stick in our memory. And because it feels so out of character, we begin wondering why we had it in the first place. What makes the call of the void interesting is that many people experience it and never talk about it. They assume they're the only ones, but in reality, these brief intrusive thoughts appear to be a surprisingly normal part of human psychology. And honestly, I think that's what makes it such a fascinating way to end this video. Because after talking about all of these rare syndromes and neurological conditions, we are left with something that millions of people have probably experienced themselves. A reminder that even healthy minds can occasionally produce thoughts that feel, strange, unsettling, or completely out of nowhere. And thankfully, having those thoughts doesn't mean you want to act on them. It just means you're human. Well, guys, that's it. We made it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's definitely a little different from the stuff I usually make. A lot of you know me for the iceberg video series that I have right now. And don't worry, those aren't going anywhere. I still have plenty of those planned. But before all of that, years ago, I used to make horror story narrations and videos that were a bit more focused on storytelling and research. And honestly, making this video reminded me of how much I enjoy learning about strange topics and then sharing them with other people. So if you enjoyed this style of content, let me know. I'd definitely like to make more videos like this in the future alongside the iceberg series that I do. Also, before I go, I just want to give one final shout out to Fortune. I mentioned him earlier in the video, but seriously, his work has been a huge inspiration to me. There was a period where I stopped uploading for a while. Quite a while, and while I never lost my interest in making videos, I definitely lost a lot of motivation. Seeing his channel grow and seeing the quality of the videos he was putting out really inspired me to just keep going and start creating again. So, in a weird way, this video is also a bit of a thank you to him. If you've never seen his channel before, I'll have it linked in the description. I highly recommend checking him out. And with that said, if you made it this far, I'd really appreciate a like on the video. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I'm also trying to make my Discord server a bit more active, so if you'd like to join and hang out with the community, there's a link for that down below as well. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.